Welcome back to Summary Central, where we save you time, save your sanity, and occasionally save you from reading entire books that hit a little too close to home. Today we're diving into The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F, which is basically Mark Manson's polite way of saying you need to stop emotionally donating to every problem like it's a charity in need. And yes, Manson uses much stronger wording. But for YouTube's monetization safety, we'll stick to cares. Think of them like emotional tokens. You only have so many. Spend wisely. If you're new here, subscribe so you don't miss future summaries that make you laugh while unpacking your existential crises. If you've been here before, comment one thing you used to care about that you now realize was a terrible investment. Let's get into it. Section 1. Why caring about everything is destroying your life. The cult of caring about everything. One of the most painfully accurate observations Mark Manson makes is that we live in a world that pressures you to care about everything, all the time, nonstop. Your phone dings and you care. Someone posts something online and you care. A stranger disagrees on TikTok, and suddenly you're emotionally invested in a battle you didn't even ask for. The text is already in English and does not require any changes. We're drowning in notifications, expectations, opinions, comparison traps, and social pressure, and every single source demands your attention like a toddler slapping your leg in a grocery store. Manson's argument is simple but brutal. You are overwhelmed not because your life is uniquely hard, but because you're emotionally overleveraged. You're giving out too many cares to things that don't matter, things that shouldn't matter, and things that have absolutely no business influencing your mental health. You care about what random strangers think. You care about being liked by everyone. You care about the fear of being judged. You care about problems you invented in your head. And most dangerously, you care about avoiding discomfort to the point where you accidentally make life way harder than it needs to be. Why overcaring is a trap you never chose. Here's the good news. This problem is not entirely your fault. Society conditions you into emotional overcaring from childhood. You're told, be nice, be polite, be agreeable, don't upset anyone, avoid mistakes, avoid being different, avoid failing, avoid being judged. On top of that, the internet runs on a business model that depends on you caring constantly about everything. So you keep clicking, keep scrolling, and keep comparing yourself to everyone else's highlight reel. Manson essentially points out that you've been programmed to overcalculate every tiny social threat like you're an ancient human trying not to be eaten by a lion. Except now the lion is someone typing mid-take bro under your post. You inherited this caring problem. But if you don't consciously fix it, it will run your life like a default operating system full of bugs. Cares are a limited resource. Manson's key message is that your emotional energy is not infinite. You only get a certain number of cares per day. He frames it like a currency, and you're out here making impulse purchases. If you treat every inconvenience as a crisis, you'll run out of emotional bandwidth for things that actually matter. Imagine waking up with 20 emotional tokens. If you spend 15 of them on worrying about what someone thinks, comparing yourself to others, stressing about tiny imperfections, replaying old mistakes, then you only have 5 left for the stuff that could actually transform your life. This is why you feel exhausted even when nothing happened. Why you feel stressed even when nothing is actually wrong. Why you feel overwhelmed by problems you didn't even choose. You're emotionally broke because you're giving out cares like they're free samples at Costco. The paradox of the modern world: the more comfortable life gets, the more you panic. Manson points out something uncomfortable but true. The easier life gets, the more fragile we become. Modern life removes a lot of the big survival problems humans used to have. No saber-toothed tigers, no mammoths to hunt, no absolute need to build a shelter, forage for food, or survive the winter with nothing but firewood and determination. So, what happens? You start assigning life or death urgency to tiny problems. Your flight is delayed 2 hours? Emotional meltdown. Wi-Fi drops for 5 seconds? Apocalypse. Barista spelled your name wrong? Betrayal of the highest degree. Your brain evolved to detect threats and respond dramatically. But when there are no real threats, it starts treating small inconveniences as emergencies. Manson calls this the modern crisis of meaning. When life lacks major problems, you invent minor ones. The irony is that not giving a care is harder when life is easy, because you haven't been trained to differentiate between this matters and this is a mosquito bite. The sneaky tyranny of endless choice. Here's another reason you're overwhelmed. Modern life gives you hundreds of options every day, and that ironically makes you more anxious, more confused, and more insecure. You're exposed to thousands of people living better, cooler, richer, fancier, or happier lives than you. Even if you logically know it's curated, your emotional brain compares itself anyway. Manson argues that choice overload creates a subtle identity crisis. Every time you see someone else succeeding in a way you're not, you wonder, should I care about that too? And suddenly, you're carrying values and priorities that aren't even yours. You didn't choose them, you absorbed them. Which leads to the next point. Your cares reveal your values. This is the big philosophical punch of Section 1. What you care about tells the values you're living by. If you constantly care about being liked, your life becomes controlled by the opinions of others. If you care about never failing, your life becomes constrained by fear. If you care about being admired, you become a performance machine. If you care about being perfect, you become perpetually disappointed. Manson's argument isn't that caring is bad. It's that caring without intention creates a life full of shallow, fragile, externally driven values. You're basically running on emotional autopilot. And autopilot only works if someone actually set the course. Most people never do. Why real freedom is the freedom to care less. People think freedom is having everything you want, doing whatever you want, whenever you want. Mark Manson thinks freedom is something else entirely. The ability to choose what to care about and ignore everything else. That's emotional sovereignty. That's mental independence. That's the foundation of the entire book. When you stop caring about every stimulus, every opinion, every fear, every distraction, and every passing thought, you reclaim control over your mind, your time, and your sanity. When you decide that's not worth a care, you regain power. And that is where your real transformation begins. Section 2. Pain, problems, and the real source of happiness. Welcome to Section 2, where we gently dismantle everything you thought you knew about happiness. If Section 1 taught you that you're caring about too many things, Section 2 teaches you that you're caring about the wrong things and suffering because of it. And again, Manson uses stronger wording, but I'll keep things friendly so YouTube doesn't panic. Let's dive in. Pain is not the enemy, it's the entrance fee. Manson makes one point clearer than a motivational poster taped to a gym wall. You cannot avoid pain. You can only choose which pain is worth your time. But modern society sells this fantasy that you can somehow engineer a life free of discomfort. Like if you buy the right self-help book, drink the right smoothie, optimize your morning routine, and align your chakras with the moon's shadow, you'll suddenly achieve a permanent state of everything is perfect. Manson calls this out as nonsense. Pain is non-negotiable. Pain is unavoidable. Pain is essential. Pain is the cost of progress. Trying to live without pain is like trying to walk without gravity. It's not just unrealistic, it's unhealthy. The key isn't eliminating pain, it's choosing meaningful pain instead of meaningless suffering. Working out hurts. Building a business feels impossible. Learning a new skill is awkward. Healing old wounds is uncomfortable. Having difficult conversations is painful. But these are useful pains. They lead somewhere. Meanwhile, obsessing over perfection, chasing validation, avoiding failure, or scrolling endlessly to numb your brain, that's pointless pain, and it leads nowhere except existential burnout. Manson's blunt truth is that suffering isn't a glitch in the system. It is the system. Meaning comes from challenges, not comfort. Growth comes from friction, not ease. Progress comes from discomfort, not pleasure. Once you accept that pain is part of the deal, you stop panicking about it and start directing it. Problems make life worth living. No, really. Here's the mindset shift that hits the hardest. Life is a constant stream of problems. Solve one, and a new one replaces it. This sounds depressing at first, but it's actually liberating. Because if problems are guaranteed, then you don't need to feel broken when you have them. You don't need to compare your problems to others. You don't need to chase a mythical problem-free life. You don't need to think something has gone wrong. You don't need to waste energy fighting reality. Manson argues that happiness doesn't come from eliminating problems. It comes from solving problems, specifically problems you actually want to solve. If you choose problems aligned with your values, the effort becomes meaningful. If you inherit problems based on fear, insecurity, or people-pleasing, the effort becomes misery. People with meaningful problems feel fulfilled. People with meaningless problems feel exhausted. Here are two real-life examples. Meaningless problem: why doesn't everyone like me? This problem is unsolvable and pointless. You could be a literal beam of sunshine and someone would still complain you're too bright. Meaningful problem: how do I become a better friend, partner, parent, or contributor? This problem requires effort, but it actually improves your life and the lives of others. Meaningless problem: why didn't my post get enough likes? Congrats, you're emotionally outsourcing your self-worth to algorithms. Meaningful problem: how do I make my work or ideas genuinely better? This problem leads to skill, growth, accomplishment, and confidence. The difference? Meaning. Why choose your problems is the only real decision that matters. Manson says you don't get to choose whether or not you suffer, but you absolutely get to choose why you suffer. This is the single most empowering idea in the book. Suffering for things you value leads to fulfillment. Suffering for things you don't value leads to resentment. Manson's core point here is that modern people spend way too much of their suffering on social comparison, image maintenance, chasing attention, avoiding discomfort, looking perfect, being admired, avoiding judgment, obsessing over failures, replaying past mistakes. None of these lead anywhere meaningful. Meanwhile, suffering through, building something, learning something, loving someone, helping others, fixing your flaws, taking responsibility, improving your health, mastering a craft, discovering purpose leads to a richer, more powerful life. The personal growth paradox. Here's the psychological twist Manson explains brilliantly. Every time you improve at something, you become aware of how much farther you have to go. Growth creates new expectations, progress creates new standards, success creates new insecurities. Improvement reveals your shortcomings with brutal clarity, which is why self-development often feels like you're moving backward. For example, when you start working out, you suddenly notice how weak you are. When you start learning about money, you realize how clueless you've been. When you start therapy, You become aware of emotional patterns you never noticed. Manson says this is normal and, ironically, a positive sign. It means you've outgrown ignorance and are entering awareness. The problem is that most people interpret this awareness as failure, so they give up and return to comfortable misery. Growth feels like fear. Growth feels like doubt. Growth feels like inadequacy, because growth is confronting inadequacy. This is why Manson repeats throughout the book that progress equals choosing better problems. If the pain is meaningful, you'll push through it. If the pain is meaningless, you'll abandon it instantly. The myth of exceptionalism and why it's making you miserable. This is one of the comedic high points of the book. Manson says everyone today wants to be extraordinary, which ironically makes us more insecure than ever. He says, and I quote, "When everyone is told they're destined for greatness, the average person ends up feeling like a failure." Because guess what? Most people are normal. Being normal is normal, and normal is not a moral failure. But if you grow up believing you're supposed to be extraordinary, then every ordinary moment feels like evidence that you're behind. You're not. You're just living with unrealistic expectations. Manson believes the obsession with being exceptional is a toxic value. It makes you chase validation instead of mastery. It makes you compare instead of evolve. It makes you perform instead of live. The result? You take on problems that aren't yours, solutions that don't fit you, and goals you don't actually want. We circle back to the book's thesis, choose better problems, and stop caring about impressing people who don't live your life. Why accepting negative experience is the doorway to positive experience. Manson drops a philosophical bomb here. The more you chase positive experiences, the more negative you feel. The more you accept negative experiences, the more positive you feel. He calls this the backwards law, borrowed from Alan Watts. If you try to feel confident, you reinforce the idea that you are currently not confident. If you try to feel loved, you reinforce the idea that you are currently unloved. If you try to be happy, you reinforce the idea that you are currently unhappy. But if you accept your flaws, anxieties, imperfections, and failures, suddenly they lose their power. Acceptance shrinks the monster under the bed. Trying to escape negative experience equals magnifying it. Accepting negative experience equals dissolving it. This is the emotional version of not giving a care. You stare your fear in the face and say, "Yeah, I see you." And no, you're not running my day. That's emotional freedom. Section 3. Values that ruin your life and what to replace them with. Welcome to Section 3, the part of the book where Mark Manson politely drags your worldview through the mud, hands it back to you, and says, "Here, now try again." And yes, he uses much stronger language than drag, but you get the idea. This section is the core of the book. If the first two sections explained why you're overwhelmed and why problems matter, this section explains why your life feels like a malfunctioning washing machine. Your values are misaligned. Let's unpack that. Bad values, the subtle poison that ruins your life. Bad values are values that are externally focused, uncontrollable, superficial, based on comparison, based on fear, based on ego, based on avoiding discomfort. These values feel normal because everyone around you is chasing them. But that doesn't make them good. Let's break down the worst offenders. Bad value. Number 1, seeking constant pleasure. Pleasure is awesome. Pleasure feels good. Pleasure is natural. But pleasure is also the most unreliable value you can build a life around. If your main goal is feel good right now, you'll destroy your health, your finances, your relationships, your self-respect, your future. Pleasure is fleeting. It never sustains momentum, and it always demands more. Manson compares pleasure chasing to eating cake for breakfast every day. Fun at first, miserable later. Pleasure should be a side dish, not the main course. Bad value, Pago 2. Being right all the time. Everyone likes being right. But when being right becomes your identity, you become defensive, closed off, unteachable. This value affects relationships, careers, self-awareness, and personal growth. Why? Because if you define yourself by always being right, then being wrong feels bad. You'll twist yourself into emotional pretzels to avoid admitting mistakes. People with this value ignore new information, avoid challenges, blame others, never evolve. If you must always be right, you'll never become better. Bad value 3. Being liked by everyone. This one hurts because most people live their entire lives chasing approval like it's currency. Manson is clear. Trying to be liked by everyone makes you like yourself less. When you value universal approval, you become inauthentic, anxious, avoidant of honesty, sensitive to criticism, emotionally exhausted. You say yes when you want to say no. You hide your real opinions. You shapeshift your identity based on the room you're in because you can't control what people think. Bad value 4. Always feeling good about yourself. This is the I'm special and amazing no matter what value. Manson says modern self-esteem culture created an epidemic of fragile confidence. If your self-worth is based on constantly feeling good about yourself, you'll avoid anything that threatens that feeling. Responsibility, self-awareness, feedback, challenge, failure, growth. You'll end up confident but incompetent, motivated but unrealistic, inspired but disconnected from reality. This isn't high self-esteem. It's emotional helium, big, floaty, but bursts easily. Bad value 5. Achieving success defined by others. This one is the silent killer. You chase money, luxury, admiration, fame, influence, not because you truly want them, but because society told you these things mean you are successful. So you chase images instead of meaning. You chase aesthetics instead of purpose. You chase recognition instead of fulfillment. Manson's argument is simple. If your values come from outside you, your life will never feel like it belongs to you. Good values, the stuff that actually leads to happiness. Now we shift to the antidote. Good values are reality-based, actionable, controllable, internal, sustainable, rooted in growth, rooted in honesty. Good values lead to better problems. Better problems lead to a better life. Let's break down Manson's recommended values. Good value 1. Taking responsibility for everything you control. Responsibility is not about fault. Responsibility is not about blame. Responsibility is about ownership. It means saying, this is my situation. I choose how I respond. This value puts you in the driver's seat of your life instead of the passenger seat yelling at Google Maps. When you take responsibility, you transform helplessness into action, confusion into clarity, pain into progress. People who value responsibility don't let circumstances define them. They define themselves through action. Good value 2, honesty, especially when it's uncomfortable. Honesty is not just telling the truth. it's living in truth. Manson says honesty is not fun. Honesty is not comfortable. Honesty often feels terrible. But honesty is the foundation of trust, growth, intimacy, self-respect, meaningful relationships, real confidence. When you value honesty, you stop editing your personality to please others. You stop lying to yourself about your flaws. You stop clinging to comforting illusions. Honesty hurts in the short term, but heals in the long term. Good value 3, vulnerability and acceptance of your flaws. Manson argues that vulnerability is emotional courage. Most people hide their flaws and insecurities because they think exposure equals weakness. But vulnerability actually signals self-awareness, confidence, authenticity, emotional stability. When you accept your flaws, you stop wasting energy pretending to be someone you're not. You stop filtering your personality. You stop apologizing for existing. You stop performing. Vulnerability lets people see the real you. And strangely, the real you is easier to love than the version you edited for approval. Good value 4, boundaries, or the art of saying no. If you don't choose your boundaries, someone else will. Boundaries are how you protect your time, your energy, your relationships, your priorities, your emotional battery. Manson emphasizes that no is not rude. No is an act of self-respect. No is an act of clarity. No is an act of alignment. Good boundaries create room for good people, good work, and good opportunities. Bad boundaries create chaos. Good value 5, curiosity, growth, and self-improvement. This is one of the healthiest values you can adopt. Curiosity keeps you humble. Growth keeps you evolving. Self-improvement keeps you grounded. These values remove the pressure of being perfect and replace it with the joy of becoming better. Manson argues that curiosity is far more sustainable than motivation. If you're curious, you'll learn naturally. If you're curious, you'll act consistently. Why good values create better problems. Here's where it all connects. If you choose good values, you choose good problems. If you choose good problems, you choose growth. If you choose growth, you choose happiness. When your values are aligned, challenges feel purposeful. Setbacks feel like training. Discomfort feels like progress. Criticism feels like feedback. Failure feels like information. Relationships feel healthier. Life feels clearer. The book's thesis is not stop caring. The thesis is care selectively using values that won't ruin your life. Section 4. Responsibility, control, and becoming emotionally bulletproof. Welcome to Section 4, where Mark Manson basically picks you up by the shoulders, looks you dead in the eyes, and says, listen, your life won't change until you accept responsibility. And yes, I know you don't want to hear that. And of course, he uses stronger wording than listen, but we're keeping things monetization friendly. This section is where the book gets serious. Not depressing, serious. Like the emotional equivalent of cleaning your room. Annoying at first, liberating after. Let's get into it. The most misunderstood truth in self-help: responsibility blame. People treat responsibility like it's radioactive. They avoid it, dodge it, deflect it, pretend they can't, act confused, point fingers, blame circumstances, blame the universe, blame their past. But Manson makes a distinction that will change your entire mental framework. Responsibility is not about fault. Responsibility is about response. You can be handed a situation you didn't choose, didn't want, didn't cause, and didn't deserve. That's called life. But what you do next is 100% on you. You're not responsible for your childhood. You are responsible for fixing your patterns. You're not responsible for someone hurting you. You are responsible for healing and setting boundaries. You're not responsible for the economy, global crises, or bad luck. You are responsible for how you respond to them. This isn't harsh. It's empowering. If you wait for someone else to fix your life, you'll wait forever. If you take responsibility, you reclaim your power. The responsibility paradox. You control more than you think, but less than you want. Manson explains this with a simple framework. There are two categories of things in life. 1, things you can control. 2, things you cannot control. Most people reverse these categories. They obsess over things they can't control. Opinions, reactions, outcomes, timing, luck, external circumstances, and they ignore the things they can control. Effort, choices, focus, boundaries, habits, mindset. This is the emotional equivalent of watering fake plants while the real ones die. If you spend your emotional energy on the uncontrollable, you feel powerless. If you spend it on the controllable, you feel capable. This is the core of becoming emotionally bulletproof. Shift 90% of your cares to things you can influence. Shift 0% of your cares to things you cannot. Sounds simple. The you chose it principle. Manson introduces a brutal but freeing idea. You always have a choice, even when it doesn't feel like it. You choose what you tolerate, what you pursue, what you pay attention to, who you allow in your life, how you react, what you prioritize, what you attach meaning to. You may not have chosen what happened, but you choose the meaning you give it. You may not choose the challenge, but you choose whether it holds you down or builds you up. This is not everything happens for a reason. Manson hates that idea. Instead, this is everything that happens gives you a chance to respond, and that response creates your life. When you take ownership of your responses, you stop feeling like life is happening to you and start feeling like life is happening through you. You're emotionally stronger than you think. Manson says people underestimate their emotional resilience because they avoid discomfort so aggressively that they never develop it. It's like going to the gym once a year and then claiming you're not strong enough to lift 10 pounds. Emotional strength is trained the same way physical strength is, through challenge, through discomfort, through failure, through effort, through endurance, through repetition. People who take responsibility consistently develop emotional muscles without even noticing it. People who avoid responsibility stay emotionally fragile. The difference isn't natural talent. It's practice. Responsibility is emotional weightlifting. Control versus influence. The subtle distinction that changes everything. Most self-help books oversimplify control. Manson makes a smarter distinction. Control things you directly determine. Influence is the things you can impact but not control. No influence is things you must ignore. For example, you can control whether you work hard. You can influence whether you get promoted. You cannot control the economy. You can control your communication. You can influence whether someone likes you. You cannot control their thoughts. You can control how healthy you try to be. You can influence your outcomes. You cannot control your genetics. People who understand these categories live peacefully. People who confuse them live in chaos. This is a foundational part of emotional resilience. Responsibility connects directly to values. Remember section 3? Your values determine what you care about. Well, responsibility determines how you act on what you care about. If you have good values, honesty, growth, responsibility, boundaries, then responsibility becomes your power source. If you have bad values, approval, validation, pleasure, being right, then responsibility feels like punishment. You cannot adopt healthier values without taking responsibility. You cannot take responsibility without defining healthier values. They are inseparable. The hidden gift of responsibility, freedom. This is where the philosophy flips. Most people think responsibility is a burden. It feels heavy, tiring, annoying, adultish. But Manson argues that responsibility is actually liberation. When you take responsibility, you stop waiting for apologies that may never come. You stop waiting for the perfect moment that never arrives. You stop blaming things you can't change. You stop expecting others to save you. You stop outsourcing your happiness. You stop clinging to excuses. Responsibility frees you from hoping. Responsibility gives you agency. Responsibility gives you direction. Responsibility gives you identity. Responsibility is the moment you stop being a character in your story and become the author. Why people fear responsibility. If responsibility is so empowering, why do people run from it? Manson says it's because responsibility always comes bundled with uncertainty and discomfort. When you take responsibility, you must confront your flaws, your bad habits, your patterns, your weaknesses, your contradictions, your excuses. That's not fun. That's not Instagram friendly. That's not love and light. But it's real growth. Most people fear responsibility because they fear discovering who they actually are beneath the performance. Responsibility reveals you, and that's scary. But that's also why it works. The emotional armor of responsibility. Once you consistently take responsibility, you become emotionally bulletproof. Why? Because nothing can truly hurt someone who knows they can handle anything. Not rejection, not failure, not criticism, not setbacks, not mistakes, not unpredictability. Responsibility gives you the courage to try. Trying gives you experience. Experience gives you confidence. And confidence is the real payoff. People think confidence comes from success. Manson argues it comes from responsibility. Because once you trust yourself to handle life, you stop fearing life. Section 5. The freedom of caring less and living more. We've reached the final section, where Mark Manson essentially hands you the keys to a simpler, saner, and more meaningful life. This is the part of the book where everything clicks. The caring, the problems, the values, the responsibility, and suddenly you understand why half your life has felt like a psychological juggling act. Let's finish strong. The real meaning of not giving a care. Here's the misunderstanding Manson spends most of the book correcting. Not giving a care does not mean becoming apathetic, lazy, cold, detached, or walking around like an emotional brick. People think it means screw everything, nothing matters, I'm out. No, that's nihilism, not maturity. Manson's definition is precise. Not giving a care means choosing what you care about intentionally, selectively, and unapologetically. You don't withdraw from life. You stop wasting yourself on the parts of life that don't matter. And yes, Manson uses stronger phrasing than don't matter, but I'll keep things clean. Real freedom is the ability to say, I see this. I acknowledge this. And no, it does not deserve my emotional energy. This is emotional minimalism. Not reducing what you feel, but reducing what drains you. Why caring less makes you care better. When you care about everything, you care about nothing deeply. When you care selectively, you care more fully. People who care about too many things scatter their emotional attention like glitter at a birthday party. Pretty at first, impossible to clean up later. But when you care intentionally, you become more present, more grounded, more stable, more invested, more authentic, more connected. Caring less broadly lets you care more deeply. You stop being pulled in 100 directions and start living according to your own compass. This is not emotional detachment. It's emotional accuracy. It's emotional accuracy. Priorities. The pillars of a simpler life. Manson's advice is to pick a handful of things that actually matter and dedicate your energy to them. Your health, your relationships, your personal growth, your purpose, your craft, your integrity, your boundaries. These are the long-term, slow-cooking values that sustain a meaningful life. Everything else, not your responsibility, not your business, not your circus, not your monkeys. People get dramatically happier when they shrink their priority list. Happiness grows in focus, not chaos. Why you need to accept that life will always have uncertainty. Uncertainty is another thing people waste their cares on. They crave certainty like it's emotional comfort food. But Manson argues that uncertainty is not just unavoidable, it's essential. Uncertainty creates learning, curiosity, humility, adventure, growth, connection. Think about it. If you already knew exactly how your life would turn out, you'd be bored out of your mind. Uncertainty is scary, but it's also what makes life meaningful. Being okay with uncertainty is one of the highest forms of emotional maturity. Manson says people who accept uncertainty stop overthinking, catastrophizing, controlling others, trying to predict outcomes, avoiding risk. Instead, they act. They experiment, they learn, they adapt. They choose living over imagining. Why rejection sets you free. Rejection is one of life's greatest gifts, dressed in the world's worst packaging. Most people fear rejection because they treat it as proof that they're unworthy. But Manson reframes it. Rejection is clarity. Rejection tells you who is not your people, what is not your path, where you shouldn't invest energy, which opportunities aren't compatible, what values don't align. Rejection narrows your life into something more accurate. Instead of chasing everything, you start selecting the right things. Rejection is a filter, not a failure. People who fear rejection stay stuck in lives that don't fit them. People who accept rejection move toward lives that do. Boundaries, the ultimate form of caring less. If you take nothing else from this summary, take this. Healthy boundaries are emotional self-respect in action. When you set boundaries, you say, I care about myself enough to protect my time and energy. Boundaries are not walls. They are filters. You're not blocking people from entering your life. You're filtering out the ones who drain you. Boundaries prevent resentment, prevent burnout, prevent manipulation, create clarity, create healthier relationships, create emotional safety. People who care too much say yes too much. People who care selectively say no, clearly, kindly, confidently. Every time you set a boundary, you strengthen the muscle of not giving a care about the wrong things. Freedom through commitment. Here's one of Manson's contrarian ideas. Commitment makes life freer, not more restricted. Why? Because commitment gives your life structure. It narrows your focus. It forces intentionality. It turns chaos into direction. If you commit to a relationship, you stop chasing external validation. If you commit to a craft, you stop wasting time dabbling. If you commit to a goal, you stop scattering your energy. If you commit to values, you stop questioning your identity. Commitment reduces emotional noise. People who constantly chase freedom through avoiding commitments end up indecisive, anxious, lonely, unfulfilled, stuck. Commitment is choosing what matters and discarding what doesn't. That's the ultimate expression of not giving a care. how not giving a care reinforces all the book's lessons. This is where all the major ideas come together. 1, you realize your cares are limited, so you must choose them wisely. 2, you realize pain is unavoidable, so you choose meaningful pain. 3, you realize problems make life meaningful, so you choose problems aligned with your values. 4, you realize your values might be broken. So you choose healthier ones. 5, you realize responsibility equals power, so you stop waiting and start choosing. 6, you realize you can't control everything, so you focus on what you can influence. 7, you realize caring less is not apathy. It's strategic emotional investment. 8, you realize commitment creates freedom, so you choose a path instead of drifting. Together, these ideas give you emotional clarity. Not perfect happiness, not constant positivity, just clarity. And clarity is what makes life livable. The art of choosing what deserves you. This book isn't teaching you to stop caring. It's teaching you to stop caring about things that drain your soul. Manson's real message is this: you have one life, limited emotional energy, and a world screaming for your attention. Choose deliberately, care intentionally, commit courageously. And for everything else, let it go. If you enjoyed this summary, make sure to subscribe and comment your favorite idea or the thing you're finally ready to stop caring about. And if you want shorter versions, check out the 15-minute and 5-minute summaries on the channel. Your emotional energy is precious. Spend it like it matters, because it does.